Happy Friday. All right. Let's get going here. Last day of productivity here before a holiday week next week. No streams next week because I'll be going out of town. So let's see what we can get done today. We've been working on routing everything through the component type. Since the component type is the only, type aware thing that we have for doing type specific actions. So I think we left off here with this move. So we were doing this big movement. Saying component types, move component. And then the component type was handling all of that movement. Oh god, it was doing nothing. All it was doing was moving it from this to this. Who's handling the cleanup? I feel like we're skipping a bunch of steps here. Maybe we're still doing it. Here we're doing the add chunk. Oh man, yeah, we're skipping some steps here. So we're doing the step here where we check to see if the chunks, if the destination chunk is like full, and we're making a new chunk if it is. But we're not doing the next step, which is to clean up the location on the source chunk. I guess that was the argument for keeping it on by having two functions, having move component from and remove component to. It handled the cleanup by itself, and all it needed was a source chunk, well, yeah, it didn't need anything else because it would figure this out. And then here it could just call the yeah, let's write it this way. Let's look at writing it this way. It's a lot of indirection, but maybe this is the way to do it here. And that way we're handling both steps. Is this handling the destination index? Source chunk item count -1. Oh, this step is just handling the filling in the gap. I see. Hey, Fox Shadow. How's it going? Good morning. How are you doing? Where are we at? We're still moving functionality around, trying to find the place where we are most happy with it. It's the agenda for this sesh. Yeah, we're still working on just deciding how to go through things like adding and removing components and stuff. Just starting with the simplest activity and then filling it out from there. I tried putting everything on the component type, but I think the chunk list has a role to play here, in that it's easier for the chunk list to handle its cleanup, to handle the more bureaucratic things that it needs to do as part of moving chunks around. So I think calling in is not terrible. So you call both of these on the same chunk. Move component from. Well, I guess source chunk doesn't have to be on your chunk list. And it kind of implies that it's actually moving things, but it's not actually doing that. There's multiple steps to this. Move component from basically says, like, get the data at its source and put it at the top of our list here, like add it to the top of our stack of chunks in whatever the last index is. If that means we need to add a new chunk to accommodate it, do it. And then remove component 2 does the opposite, does the cleanup phase, which is we've moved this information from here to some destination. And then what we need to do here is we need to fill in the gap. We need to fill in the gap. So when we're here and we're going through this process, we're going through each chunk list and moving components. And then this can be the actual action here. So we can go back to chunk list. And then for this part with this dest span, source span, this whole thing here, we can just say, we can replace that with this. We need a type flag. So we just say component type dot move component. Source indices. Here we have the source index. So we pass in the source chunk. I don't think we need to arguably do that, but let's do it. So let's just say source index, since we're passing it in. A move component needs to know the destination index, doesn't it? Because it's not guaranteed that we're just going to pop something on the top. should rewrite this to take an index, a destination index. You can make a data structure that holds all of this stuff, but I think we need to do that right now. All right, so now we can move components without having direct access to the type of component involved. Just do this. You need to pick the destination index. Destination index is just dst chunk dot item count. Well, in this case, it's item count.
If they do, if one day physics finds a use for them, that's great. But if not, that's great too.
It should be called add component from.
That would mean that we have, with this
Because it implies that we're just adding it on top.
a tiny thing, a septillion times smaller than the tiny planet it lives on.
Yeah, I want a little data structure that holds a chunk, that holds the chunk in the index, or something like that. Or it could just hold the chunk index. I guess I have the chunk index, a chunk index data structure. And then here we just put in. So instead of all this, which one do we want to actually keep? Source chunk. So we want source chunk, because we use this quite a bit here. So we need to calculate the index of this destination somehow.
If they do, if one day physics finds a use for them, that's great. But if not, that's great too.
Layer this above here. Say source chunk, then we say source chunk item count -1. Get rid of this. All right, so that's how we do it. So we can add a component from a source chunk, which just plops it on top of the last chunk at the destination. Or we can remove a component too, which just pops, which just grabs the last chunk or the last entity in our last chunk and inserts it into the gap that was introduced by the move. So this gets passed to two different chunks, or it gets passed to two different chunk lists to execute. So to the source chunk list we call, or for the destination one we call add component from. And then at the source we call remove component to. This is a little ambiguous, this name remove component to. That's not exactly what we're doing. We're almost like backfilling a gap. Let's call it fill component gap. That seems more like what we're doing, because we're filling this gap that we're leaving from this add component from maneuver here. All right, that seems acceptable as our move here. Oh, the chunk list knows what the flag is, so we don't actually need to pass this. Let's just rename this type flag. Where's my constructor? Am I setting all of these? There we go. What is with type flag? Where else do we use that? Oh. Quest to B. Hey, how's it going? It's going good. How about you? Welcome to the chat. All right, so these can be made private again, this add chunk and remove chunk thing. Which is good. I don't really want anyone adding or removing chunks except the chunk list itself. What are you doing there? We're working on an entity component system for a for the simulation layer of a game we're making. So this entity component system will represent all of the game data. All right, so now we have our add component from and our fill component gap, so we can replace some of this here. So this logic here, this destination chunk, this checking the size of the chunk, don't need to do. We need to get the source chunk and the destination chunk list, source chunk list dot type flag. Cool, what kind of game? So it's an FTL-like. I could have just done this. This is kind of our inspiration. I don't know if you're familiar with FTL Faster Than Light, but it's a starship simulation kind of game. This is a classic game about managing your crew, managing the power distribution of your ship, keeping the systems running. This is a top-down 2D game. We're kind of working on more of a side-on, pseudo-isometric kind of thing. It's going to look more like this. It's kind of more the art style we're going. Right now we're just putting together the tools and the frameworks that we're going to need to make this. So we have a little editor tool that has an auto tiler built into it so that we can build out these ships. And we're working on the systems that's going to manage all of the data, all of the simulation of like what's going on these ships. We're working in Godot, but I don't really want that part of the game to be node-based, so we're kind of doing it in our own thing. Sounds interesting. You have no clue about games and stuff? No worries. Thanks for hanging out. Pixel art looks hella cute. Thank you. That's mine. I'm doing the art as well. So it's very slow going because I'm kind of doing everything. But I think it's gonna be pretty good. We're hopefully investing all the time in this framework so that it's a lot easier to make the game once we get this together. That's always the trade-off when you make a tool, is your hope is that the tool will make everything else faster to such an extent that it was worth putting all the time into making the tool. Like everything by yourself, a one-man project? Yeah, pretty much. That's the plan, at least, you know. And it's really raining outside. I want to keep an eye. Oh yeah, there's like a stream of water going down the street. It's like a big storm coming through right now. So hopefully, hopefully the stream doesn't get interrupted or anything. Damn, that's impressing. Yeah, well, you can be impressed when I'm done with it. When I've got more to show. We're still early days. I know this is episode 104, but that's been a lot of time prototyping, trying stuff out. doesn't work out, so we try something else out, you know, that sort of thing. You got some snow last night? Nice. I mean, I've got it easy. We're kind of at the edge of this storm. There's a lot of regions north of us that are getting just like pounded by rain and probably snow, but I think mostly rain. I like it. I like the rain. All right, so what are we doing? So we're substituting in, so we're saying, so from the source chunk list, which we have, so the source chunk list is going to call add component from, oh no, the destination chunk list does this. Destination chunk list calls add component from, and we pass in the source chunk, and we pass in the source indices. .interchunk. Call this the entity indices. Entity indices .intra chunk within the chunk. Inter means like between, and intra means like within. Should I just write between and within? Probably, but probably less prone to error. Rain and snow can be super calming. Yeah, I like it. I live in a area that's like pretty, it's like either foggy or it's like kind of sunny, but we don't get a lot of weather here, and I kind of enjoy it when it does come through. All right, so we do that on the destination chunk, and then the source chunk list calls fill component gap, and we do that at the source chunk and the intra chunk. I'm going to change this a little bit. Instead of calling it destination chunk, we're going to call it the gap chunk in the gap index. Whatever. We'll call it destination because that's where we're filling to. It's a little confusing, but makes sense to me. And then this part we don't need to do. This is handled. And then what we do need to do is we get down to the bottom, because we're only copying over the components that did exist in the source. So we do ultimately need to add the component. And then this we're going to actually just do on here, aren't we? So we declare the destination chunk list here. Probably want to declare it up here so we can use it. Oh no. I see what we're doing. So we want another destination chunk list here. Oh, do these really conflict? They're in different scopes. I guess they're not really. Can we just say DST archetype. Arguably don't need to declare this. But it doesn't matter. So but here we can say destination archetype dot chunk lists. We can say type flag. Dot add component. Now we need to pass in the value, t value. Let's see about this. Let's see about this. Public void add component, t value. Where t is unmanaged. See about this. So this is a lot like add component from, but it's a little different. So we need to do this check first. We need to add a chunk if we are at the capacity. We need to find our destination chunk. And then we'll call component type dot types. Can we just say component type t? No, we can't. This could be a static function, couldn't it? The add component. Look, static add component. We would say for add component, we would just say read, write, span. We'd need to know the destination chunk and the destination index. Don't need to know the entity ID. I should make like a destination. I should make like a chunk address or an entity address data structure that just keeps track of the chunk and the addresses of it. That's probably what I should do. So I don't have to pass all these different things around. So now we can just say read, write, span, destination chunk. Destination index equals value. Easy. It's definitely not the most performant thing to just go out, get a span every time we need to do something, but this is the rare thing. It's gonna be individually adding and moving and stuff. Most component sets and set component too. Most of this stuff is gonna be batch based. And we need to write it in such a way that it can be, so that we're not getting a span every time. The systems will just get a span back and will operate directly on the span. The reason we're having all of these functions are so that we can handle individual requests. Request to be with the hydrate, thank you. Questa, since you're not really doing game dev, you said, what are you doing? What's going on with you? Get rid of this. I don't think we need these. We can say component type t dot add component. Destination chunk. Destination chunk dot item count. Value. Easy. Remove component is a little tougher. I don't think it's that much tougher. So we pass. No, okay. Working in manufacturing, trying to get a CS degree. Oh, nice. Hell yeah. Mostly just do still little projects for uni, not big stuff like me. Little projects are better. I'm gonna say it right now. I'm little projects doing like a game jam, making a game in like a weekend or a week or 2 weeks or whatever. That is the way to do it. To learn. Don't do this. Don't be like, I want to make a game that's going to take 5 years to make. It's not a good idea. T value. So, do I not have that here? Yeah, I do have that here. Why are you complaining about me? Oh, do I not need to define the T? Can I just say value? Okay, cool. All right, that's our add component function. That's not that bad. We get an archetype. That's the destination. We could encapsulate this, except we have this add or remove, and I would need to tell it whether we were adding or removing. We could still encapsulate it. It could be like get archetype for add. Get archetype to add component, something like that. Or it'd be get archetype from, and then you would say source archetype. Or I don't know. You could do it a couple different ways. Fusionist. Welcome to the chat. Questa, do you do this as a hobby or is this also your job? No, I am not paid to do this. I also have a day job. I was very lucky, and I convinced them to give me a new schedule, which lets me do game dev and streaming during the middle of the day like this for a few hours. It's a pretty recent development, so we're trying to make the most of it. How's it going, Fusionist? Welcome in. I feel like we're in the thick of the holidays right now because it seems like everyone's busy doing something. Time is it where I am? It's 11. It's about 11:22. I'm in Pacific time. So it's really like the middle of the day. So I kind of catch like the Europeans just before they go to sleep, and then up through, you know, in the Americas here, it's kind of like more the middle of the day. All right, so I think this get component is fine. There's definitely some improvements we could make, but I think this is good for an add component. Do we use the entity ID? Yeah, we do. We use it to get the archetype and then to set the archetype back. We should have like a try get. Chilling, idly coding. Nice. Yeah, we're good. We're working on an entity component system that we're doing for not a great reason. You think you saw me around in Rinks stream? Maybe. I don't get to watch Rinks very often, but Rinks is cool. What kind of stuff are you working on right now, Fusionist? Or if instead, what kind of stuff would you like to be working on? if you don't want to be working on the stuff you're currently working on. Are you making a small platformer project of yours since yesterday? Nice, nice. Are you starting from scratch, or are you kind of just trying to rewrite what you've got? I feel like when you do a small project, especially if it was a jam, I think you're better off to just like pull the assets out and like rewrite the code base entirely from scratch. It hurts, but I think like because if you wrote it over a short period of time and you were like crunched for time, I think your requirements were different. But if you're rewriting something like that, I think it's just better to just start over. You gotta go. No worries, Questa. Thanks for hopping in. I hope I catch you next time. We're kind of doing this every day, Tuesday through Saturday, actually, now. I forgot about that. So we'll be doing this tomorrow. Thanks for the follow. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Oh, thanks for the stretch. That'll help. Hope you have a great rest of your day. You're gonna drown me in water here. With the constant hydrates. Fusionist, yeah, that's true. Oftentimes, this one is a 3-year-old game jam to scratch. Yeah, that's wise. Just redo the whole thing. You're doing a clean version of jam games you were passionate about, where you try to complete the vision with the jam code base, but sometimes it's just not good enough. Yeah. Thank you, Questa. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Yeah, Fusionist. I'm in the midst of like I spent a couple months trying to improve the first game jam I did this year. And I spent months on it, and like it's like 95% done, but I haven't touched it since like July because I just like can't bring myself to like do the last few steps that's necessary. And then I did another jam in August, like a 3-day jam, and I spent no additional time on it. Like it was just it was just done after the jam, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad. That's so much better than having to spend all this time trying to like close the gap between what your vision was and like what the jam game ended up turning being. But yeah, if you're passionate about it, if you see something really good there, that's definitely worth pursuing. Where do you stand on this project's timeline? We're about 9 months in since I restarted since I started streaming this project, which is pretty close to the beginning of the project. And you know, so we're like almost a year down, and we've probably got about 4 or 5 years left to go. So early days. Early days. We're still really just on the framework and tools stage of this game. Happened to you before? That's satisfying. Yeah. When the jam just comes together, like when you just got the scope right and it just came together and you don't have to do anything else to it, you're like, this is done. It feels so good. All I did after the jam was like add controller support and I think like fix a couple bugs with like the UI. All right, so we need to do the remove component now. So I think the add is working as we intended it to. Can we just say this? Can I like not even declare this variable? Yeah. Yeah, it's really coming down out there. See you in 4 years, I guess. Yeah, I'll still be here, I hope. It is a little tough. It's tough not having a lot to show. We've got our art style kind of locked in, and we've got some tools together already. Like we're going for this kind of isometric side-on look as a variation of FTL. And then we've got an auto tiler and like a tool to build this stuff, to like build some of this stuff out, like building the ships. It's very rudimentary, but we've got it. The auto tiler was fun. Yeah, I'm doing it all. I'm doing it all Fusionist, which is part of the reason why it's going to take so long. I hadn't even thought about audio yet. It's nice though. Yeah, this is like my nice little garden where nobody messes with anything. It's just, so it's a double-edged sword because it's nice because like I do all of it. It's all mine, 100% mine. But it's not nice in that if I'm working on one thing, nothing else is happening. So you really got to choose your time, says the guy who is making his own entity component system for no good reason. So, you know, do what I say, not what I do. So let's bring this in line a little bit here. Entity indices. I kind of want to change this to just entity address or something, but oh no, that the entity indices is like the address. It's about as close as we're gonna get because the index is stored separately. All right, so this we can change. We can just say this. Yeah, we gotta actually remove the component that we're trying to remove. That's the goal. Oh, we were just grabbing their type flag, right? No reason to stay bored. Yeah, yeah, that's true. Definitely not bored. So we're still using these functions, but we're calling them. So this is add component from. This is fill component gap. So we add the component from, and then we fill the component gap left from this. We could call this like remove component. But who cares? This could almost be encapsulated in something. Whatever. It's like the identical code to what the other one is doing. Because this is just the moving the component phase. And then we got to do this part. We got to do the actual removal down here at the bottom. And to do that, we're doing something like this. DST archetype.chunklists of the type flag dot remove component. DST archetype. That's what we start with, right? Yeah. Chunk lists of this type flag dot remove component. Are you upset? Oh, we don't implement a remove component function. Let's do that. Get rid of the T. This could be, the get component could be static too, huh? Pretty much all of these could be static, couldn't they? Probably do this differently. All right, so our remove component. Is this really something that you're going to call on the component? This is probably more something that you call on the chunk list, isn't it? All right, we got ads coming in a minute. This is like fill component gap, isn't it? Because we get this, we know what we're trying to remove. This should be more like remove component at. That's what this is. Because then we just fill, we just backfill. Yeah, let's call it that, because it more explicitly describes what's going on here. So we're going to call this remove component at. It'd be cool if we had this be like some kind of atomic interaction instead of a pair of function calls to two different targets here. So this is gonna be, this is just remove component at how do I find this? How do I find this location? Oh, this is actually the opposite. So this actually needs to be the destination chunk in the destination archetype. And then what we need to do, so the destination chunk is the destination chunk list. And then this is actually, we need to get the source chunk list. We need to do the opposite because we want one less of these things. DST chunk list. Seracia Vieira. Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the chat. Are you the Seracia I know? Or another Seracia? Either way, how's it going? All right, so we've reversed this from this because when we do the add, we want to copy all of the source chunks over, the source components that are already on this entity, and then we add another one. When we're removing a component, we only want to copy over the components that are going to be in the destination. So this will actually be source archetype dot chunk list dot type flag remove component at. This could just be remove component. Let's just say remove component entity ID. Entity ID. It's better if it's the component type that does this, I guess. I don't know. Maybe there was an ad right after you said hello. Oh yeah, that is you, Seracia. Hi. I just looked at your profile and I saw your Godot icon. How's it going? Sorry you got caught in the ads. How's Godot life? How's East Coast life too? Alright, so the chunk list is doing the add, which makes sense because we just pop it on top. Remove component is like the same as the remove component add. The difference is just add component and add component from. So we could have a remove component function. Yeah, we should do that. So we'll have a remove component. Void remove component. Well, no, it is the same as remove component add, isn't it? Yeah, it is. It's exactly the same. So we just pop the component out and put another component. We just move down whatever the last component was. Pop it up here. Oh, there's some cleanup associated with this, isn't there? Because we're essentially moving an entity from one spot to another, and that entity needs to know where it's been moved to. Okay, yeah, we need to add that functionality there. It's different, but you like it? Nice. Nice. You're missing a big storm here right now, but I'm sure you've gotten your fill of big storms. Been raining like crazy. Wind and rain. Oh, do we not use this anywhere? No, we don't. Okay, so source chunk is... Actually, it can just be this. We get the chunk, and then we say dot chunks. And we say entity indices intra chunk. Oh, interchunk, not intra. Yeah, that's not a great naming convention. It's clear, it's you know, it's explicit about what it means, but it's definitely easy to make mistakes. When you just have inter versus intra, not great. But thanks for hanging out. Seems like everyone is quite busy with holiday stuff. I think everyone got out of town because not a lot of people have come by. Thanks for the hydrate, Pierogi Dev. It's good to see you. How's it going? It's going good? That's great to hear. Says this is your first time chat. I feel like we've spoken before. I'm good. Just kind of plugging along at this entity component system here. Some of the more basic features that such a system would have. Okay, so we need to implement this, we need the indices. We need the chunk and the index. All right. So I need to know where we're removing from. I need to know this. So we would say, we could just make this one long thing here. We could do this, source chunk, type flag. And then that. That would do it. I know my head is covering up a lot of that code. Maybe on other people's stream, possibly. But how are you? What are you working on? What kind of dev stuff are you getting up to? All right, this to-do is done. You've been trying to update your game? This is one of those things where it's like the code base has been around for so long where it's like really hard to update, because I feel like that's what usually happens. I think this archetype by entity ID dictionary is going to need to become public. Unless we make... No. We could make this complicated, but let's not do that. Let's make it simple. We're gonna make these public. We need to update this information. At least this one needs to be public. I don't know about the other one. We'll do it. We'll do it for now. No, you have to refactor half your code to add new stuff because your coding is terrible. No. I mean, I'm sure yes, but the way I think of it is like, you know, your coding is always improving. The code that you wrote may be terrible, but like, you know, you write it again, it'll be better. Every time you write it, it'll be better. And you can be good at writing code and still write terrible code because you're like pressed for time or you don't care. You think it's like throwaway. I honestly think the first time you write any given system, it should be kind of trash because you don't know if you're actually going to need that. You don't know if you're actually meeting all the requirements. You don't know if the requirements are going to change. So I actually think the first time you write something, it should be kind of bad. But obviously the trade-off of that and the way you're punished is that if you have to, when you have to go back to it, it's hard. All right, so now we're removing the component. We could do something stupid where we go something like this. We could say like archetype by ID, by entity ID, source archetype. No, this is really dumb. We would want to save this. We would want to basically say variables source chunk. Oh, that conflicts. Let's say top chunk is all this mess. Fusionist, thank you for the follow. I appreciate that. Hope you're enjoying the co-working space here. Top chunk. Oh no, we aren't passing top chunk in. Oh yeah, no, we're not doing this here. We made it public, so here we can do it. So when you remove a component, what we need to do is we need to say game.world.archetype by entity ID. Then we need the entity ID, so we need to say oh shoot. Well, we need to get the oh, this is tough. This is tough. We need to maybe rethink how we're doing this. Because the thing is, when we're backfilling like this, like what we're doing, because you basically don't want to leave any gaps in the component chunks. You want to make sure that there's no empty space. So if we delete a component from the middle of the chunk somewhere, we're moving a component from the back into that spot. But we need to update the system with where that new information, where that new entity lives. And I'm not sure how to do that. Does the archetype know where its entities are? It does. Oh wait, is this just archetype by ID? Oh, it is. No, that doesn't change then. Never mind. Never mind. I'm an idiot. We need to change something else, but not this. Because we're not changing archetype. I mean, we are, but not in the way that I was thinking. Oh. I'm in the habit of manually changing these things when I really need to do a refactor. A proper rename. So that it cleans up all the references. Alright, that's fine. No harm done. But what we need to do is here in the archetype we have a chunk indices object, so for our entity indices. So what we do need to do is we need to update this information. And we need to do two things. So when we add somebody for the add component, we need to do this once, so we should do it in the add component, not in the add component from. I don't like hiding this in here, but that's what we're going to do for right now. We're going to say archetype dot entity indices. So we do need to pass in the entity ID. You say entity ID equals, yeah. Oh, and we need to do this line. We need to do this chunks. Doesn't equal destination. It's going to be equal destination chunk with item count is destination chunk item count plus 1. So we need to do that. Oh, we need to say is a new chunk indices entity ID. Interchunk is just, oh, how do we do that? How do we do that? Oh, it's just chunks dot count minus 1. And then this is just DST chunk dot item count. Okay, so we're registering this correctly for the add, and the remove needs to do the opposite of this. Having the chunk indices store the entity ID makes literally no sense, so we're going to stop doing that. Oh, but we need it for an equals evaluation. To make sure that the information's up to date. Yeah, I guess that's fine. All right, so then when we do the, oh, here's the problem. So the remove component at is not good. Maybe this needs to be somewhere else. Maybe this thing maybe needs to be on the archetype. I don't know where we're gonna do this, where we're gonna update the entity indices thing. Gotta figure out where though. Doesn't make sense for there to be a remove component on the component type. Why do we have a problem with this value thing? Oh, because I insisted on doing this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do it this way. I'm going to do it this a different way. Yeah, we can do this here. We can do this on the world. We can add the component value, and then we can say destination archetype dot entity indices equals a new, well, we can say entity indices entity ID is a new entity indice, a new chunk indices. Say entity ID. We say oh, yeah, so this needs to happen because we're moving something to a new archetype. I'm worried about this cleanup, the cleanup of the backfilled entity more than anything else. We also have to do this though, what I'm doing here. We have to register the newly added entity. Archetype.chunk. Well, we don't really need to say chunk lists. We need to say Maybe this should go through the archetype to an extent. I don't love that, but maybe we need that. If we need the archetype to keep track of this information, maybe the archetype needs to. And the reason I wasn't doing this is because we need to do cleanup on both the archetype, the archetype. I guess we maybe just have a move to and a move from. We could just assign responsibility to one of them, the one who's receiving or the one who's sending. Just specify who should be involved in that. I don't know yet though. Okay, so DST archetype dot chunk lists. No, we don't need the chunk lists. Yeah, we need information about where indices are. Do we have an item count? Does the archetype have an item count? It does have an item count, but it's private. Doesn't have to be. Maybe we just, on the world, we just get the two archetypes involved. Doodley's catch. Hey, how's it going? It's going well. We're arguing with ourselves about some organizational stuff, but it's going okay. How are you? Happy Friday. Maybe we should graph this out a bit. Taking a break from your project? Nice. Let's add a card. Let's say... Let's call this chunk index. Let's just call it index. Or slot, I don't know. Component. Slot. No, that's too long. Just call it, we'll say index. Make this small. Let's make like an arbitrary number of these. Then let's group these together.
Maximum what?
Indeed. So this is a chunk. Then we're gonna have a few of these chunks. Let's make like 3 of them or something. Oh. Let's actually have this one not be full. I think it's fine to just have 2 of these in the example. And then this is going to be grouped together into a chunk list. Then we'll make a bunch of these. Make a few of these. Make like 3 of them or something. 2 of them. And then so this is an archetype. This all becomes slightly off. Like too easy to just slightly desynchronize everything. All right, so here's our archetype. Call this like our source archetype or something like that. Actually, this will just be the archetype that we copy from. We've got our archetype, so let's copy a couple of these. And let's visualize some of what's going on here. So here's like it's somewhere here. And let's get rid of one of these. This will be our destination archetype. This needs to go to like this. This needs to like go to like this. Oh, not like that though. Just say for argument's sake that there's like less things here. So this will go to like this one. This will go to like this one. And then we've got a new value. We'll call this value. Problem is that when we make this change, these ones need to move up. When these ones move up, we need to tell this archetype that this entity has changed, that this entity has moved. And we don't know this entity, so we just need to get this entity. And let the archetype know that this entity at the bottom of the list is in this new spot. Because we moved everything else over to this new archetype. All right. I mean, we knew all of that already. What I'm not capturing there is how we want to do that. So it's really the source archetype that is the one that really needs to know this new thing. Well, no, I guess we need to register that new entity as well on the destination. So that's just something we need to do. And we need to clean up the old reference. So we need like... So we need like... So we'll get these entity indices, and then what we're going to do for the source archetype, that indices. Let's just remove that. Let's just see. Well, let's get the value of it, and then let's remove it. Clean. And here we need to know this new one. That's the thing. That's the thing about this. It's this add component. Let's just add something to the archetype that maybe knows this. I mean, I guess it's just this. This current item count and this max item count. Oh, I really don't want to chain these functions like from the world to its archetype down to its chunk lists. Maybe that's the way to do it, though. Maybe it doesn't matter that much. For adding and removing, that doesn't really matter. That's not like an incredibly performance-sensitive thing, so maybe we just do that for simplicity's sake. We just get the archetypes, and then we just tell the archetypes what we want to do. But you need to know what component's the new component, don't you? Which is why I put it on the world here. Let's see what we can do. We could probably just have the chunk list updated. Maybe we just have add and removes, and we either do pass a component or we don't. And if we do pass a component, we know that that's like a new component that they didn't have before. I don't know. I don't know. There's so many ways to do this, that we could do this. Got kind of an analysis paralysis here. Thank you for the hydrate, dude list. I'm running out of water. How's the back? It's better. It's better. It's different, but it's better. It definitely still is not comfortable to sit for any period of time, but I can do it for like an hour or two. I am getting so tired from standing all the time. Standing still is like, does not feel great for hours. I try to keep moving a little bit, but I can't move that much because the lower back still does hurt. So I don't know. But yeah, thank you. Do you have like a standing chair? Something to lean slightly on? No, I don't. That would be maybe cool. I'm either sitting or fully standing. I do have a standing desk, so I have the choice between the two. But no, I don't have like one of those lean little stool things. I looked at one of those at one point. Didn't get it. Kind of don't want to clutter up my room with more like optional chairs, but could be a nice in between. Yeah, could be. I've tried to get like the big yoga ball, but it was hard to find one that was like the right size. It's like I'm struggling who I want to be in charge of this. I want to know about the changes to the archetype. So I guess the changes should just get propagated up from the lists. No, that doesn't make sense. I think I need to tell the archetype what's happening, and then the archetype will manage the actual chunk list movement. And that way it's easier to pass information just to the archetype once about what's happening. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. In which case, why are you telling the world that we need to do this at all? I guess the world figures out which archetype is going to manage it. I guess that's fine. It's weird because we've got this entity component system, but like the thing managing the entity component system is like very object oriented. That feels bad. Like the structure of the thing that is managing the ECS is very much like these inherited classes that are like these virtual tables. I don't like. I don't love it. I'm not happy about that, but I don't know a better way to do it. So in theory, what we would do for this add component, we get our two archetypes. We'd get the destination archetype and the source archetype. And and we'd call add on the destination, and then we'd call remove on the source, something like that. Makes me wonder how I'm going to do object or entity initialization. Like when I want to add a new entity. How am I going to do that? It's going to be super weird to do that. Am I going to need to create the entity and then populate the things? Is that how it's going to have to be? Because right now we don't really have a system for setting multiple components or setting all the components. Maybe we need a system that's lightweight enough that we can do it individually and then just chain the individual changes. I don't love that. That doesn't feel good. I guess, again, adding and removing is very different than setting. Setting is maybe that's just what we need to do. Just not worry about the setting part. Just do the add and the remove. And then have setting be a separate pass. I think the add and set combination is causing me a lot of pain. Because like create entity, I guess create entity won't cause any problems. Let's try that. Let's see what that would look like. Yeah, we need a get archetype that may create an archetype. So we need another version of get archetype, but that takes a. So we need an archetype, get archetype, composition. I do love that kind of function overloading that we cannot do in GDScript, where you can just have multiple functions that are named the same thing. So this is going to say if archetype by composition we're not going to do a contains, we're going to do a try get value. Yeah. We just return that. Have this be an expression body. we not do this by expression body? Return archetype. There we go. So if we don't return the archetype, then we need to make the archetype. So when we say create, does archetype return us an archetype? Yeah, it does. Alright, we're gonna create archetype. Or we'll return create archetype. Why would you do this? Oh, I can make it an operator. Yeah, I guess I could do that. You either return the result of the try get value of the archetypes by component, or you create an archetype. Yeah, that's pretty much what we want to do. That's the correct method if you're trying to get an archetype by its composition. And then so when we create an entity, we want to do that basically. We want to say variable archetype is get archetype by this composition. We're heading into, we need to start thinking about entity IDs. If I go down this road very far. So we'd have a couple of things here. We'd have a list which is we basically need to do the sparse entity dense entity thing, which I can demonstrate a little bit of. Where's the bit of this for entities? There isn't one for entities. There should be. There should be a section of this for entities here. The entity index, here we go. Yeah, so this is what we kind of need to do. Let me move over a little bit so we can see the whole thing. So there's a sparse and a dense array, essentially. And the reason you have this is so that all the alive entities can be densely packed at the top. And the dead entities can be at the bottom so that we know which entities we can reuse their index. And then you have a sparse lookup that's just the actual entity index. Or a sparse array that's just the straight up entity index. And then you have a dictionary to get between them. So we won't use 0 because we want 0 to not represent a, we want 0 to represent an undefined entity. It's interesting. They increment the version when the entity dies, not when you reuse the entity. I think that's interesting. Got ads starting in 30 seconds. I'll take a quick break, probably get some more water. People have been really hitting me with the with the hydrates today. So I need to go get some more water, but I'll wait until the ads start for that. Right now we're kind of just thinking about, because I want to think more clearly about the movements between archetypes, I want to kind of just put some more of the actual entity ID movement stuff in here. Because I think it'll help me think about it more clearly. Yeah, thanks, Doodliest. It's being as one of the contributors to this run on the. I have 5 hydrates this stream. It's crazy. Feel so hydrated. I'm really curious about incrementing the version when the entity dies instead of doing it when the entity is recycled. We definitely do want the swap on delete. That's the very functionality that we're talking about for the archetype, but that's in the context of the components. We're talking about this in the context of the entity. Keep that health up. Yeah, we're trying. So we're bringing entity 2 back from the dead here. So we're updating the sparse array index. So we're swapping. Oh, they've recycled E4 and E2? They plug in the component, the composition of these entities now. All right, we got the ads. I'll be right back. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. Wish you could provide feedback to my process. I know, I don't have a process. What we're doing here is pretty rough, but I appreciate the company. All right, we're back. You're just over here with your blueprints. Oh, you doing that Unreal stuff with the blueprints? Making your FPS. I don't think it's basic. I don't think any FPS is basic. You're almost done with the core functions for your first game, though? Hell yeah. All right, I think I have an idea of how to do this. So we'll have an entities array here. And then we'll have a dictionary keyed by an index, giving you another index. And that's going to be entities. It's going to be entity index. Oh, this is a little weird. Call this dense entity list. Oh, flash flood warning is just coming in for us here. Keep an eye on that. Call this the entity manifest. I don't know. Probably just call this sparse entities and dense entities. We can say entities index by entity ID, I guess. It's not by entity ID though. It's by like another index. Let's have a dense entities list and let's have a sparse entities list. Actually, this is a list of entity IDs, isn't it? Yeah, okay, so that's a list of entity IDs. Call this entity ID by index. There we go. Entity IDs. I don't know about the archetype by entity ID thing. I see why they're not doing it this way in the example, and it's because you need to clean it up. Whereas if you just put it as part of the array, well, I guess you need to clean it up either way. But let's start with this. Let's start with a list of entity IDs in a dictionary where you can get the entity ID by its index, because the entity IDs are going to move around in this list. We're also going to have an entity count. Call it the live count. I don't know. Entity live count. Having it start with 1 is kind of annoying, actually. You could always just have an entity ID initialize with a negative number so we don't accidentally do this sort of thing. You could say something like index equals -1. Can we not do that? Or they have to appear after required parameters? That way we get an error if we accidentally try to use an uninitialized entity. I like that better than reserving the 0 index. It's probably better to reserve the 0 index.
have reached the voicemail box of
Kino.
Just wait for the tone.
So if we want to create an entity, we need to be able to get the next index. Get the next entity ID.
The person you're trying to reach is not available right now. If you need further assistance, enter pound now. Please leave your name, number, and a message after the tone.
Oh, I see why we set the version, why we increment the version as soon as we do it. Well, it doesn't really matter actually. We can do it however we want. We can be like get next entity ID.
Bye.
So for get next entity ID, we're basically going to look at the first entity ID. So if the live count is 0, we look at the 0th entity ID. So we actually basically say we compare the count of entity IDs against the entity live count. If the live count is less, we'll use that. We'll use a recycled ID. I don't know if we need to store that. Create entity should probably return an entity ID. We say something like if entity live count is less than entity IDs dot count. Can we say something stupid like this? Can we say something like, well, let's do the else first. Let's handle the else, the other case. The other case, so if the live count is the same as the entity count, if all the entities that have been created are alive. Oh, Jordan Jackson, you just popped in. What am I working on? We're working on the entity component system that's going to power an FTL-like game that we're making. Like an FTL faster than light style, like a Star Trek simulator. We're working on some of the framework stuff for that. How are you doing? All right, so if we don't have an available entity ID, let's have just a recycle Wait, why do I have two of these? Oh, create entity is going to involve a get next entity ID call, probably. Is probably what I'm saying here. Let's move this functionality then. Does not need to be public. This can be private. Honestly, create entity should also be a no, create entity should be public. So get next entity ID would return. So we'll say this is where we do the stuff. This is where we do this part. We'll also have another function here. It can be recycle entity ID. And we'll use that for if there is an existing ID. So we can say private create entity ID. Okay, so we don't want create entity. This is, oh yeah, this is just create entity, and it returns an entity ID. We maybe don't need a create entity ID. We could be like recycle, and then maybe we just do it. Awesome, you're doing pretty good. Just saw this stream and thought it looked interesting. I appreciate that, because I appreciate that you thought that looked interesting, because I feel like what I've been doing the last few weeks is really boring. We're really doing the boring work right now. The low-level code. We have some tools. I can't demonstrate them right now because the code is kind of broken. I could probably fix it and show it pretty quickly if I wanted, if we wanted to, but maybe I can show it. What else is broken here? I see a bit of red here somewhere. Here we go. This is kind of what we've got so far as tooling, because we're doing this isometric 3D thing, right? So it's kind of like FTL faster than light, except you've got multiple decks to your ship, like they're vertically stacked. So you've got more of like a 3D chess kind of situation where you're going to be moving crew around and redirecting power over a three-dimensional ship. So we have a very rudimentary tool so far that uses an auto tiler that I made, an isometric auto tiler. To basically, we can basically lay out blocks and the auto tiler will figure out how those blocks should be rendered. So we can make like a top deck here. So it can be like, here's the top deck, and notice how the outline is changing because the auto tiler is figuring out how you would draw such a thing. We can add a room here below this top deck. It can tell whether the room is enclosed or exposed to outer space. It changes color just as a visual aid right now. So we can have like compartmentalization like you would in FTL. So you can have like, you know, you can control the atmosphere of a room. So we just lay this out. We have some visibility tools to help you peer into this because that's going to be a big problem. It's like, how do you see in these situations? So we can keep adding more rooms here. We can add this thing. There we go. So this bottom area is more exposed to space. We can fix that by sealing it in here. We can add doors, like airlock doors. You can just seal this room if we want it to be an airlock. can add some. The auto tiler works on doors too, which I'm pretty pleased with. So we can make bigger or smaller doors. It'll scale up. We can also rotate the world around because of the way we're doing this, because of how we separated the rendering data from the gameplay data. But yeah, so we have a process for building these things. The art, I really haven't had a lot of time to work on the art. So the art's pretty rudimentary, but it's coming along. Appreciate you stopping by, checking it out. It's been pretty quiet the last couple of days. I think everyone's busy off doing holiday traveling and stuff. So nice to have a couple of quiet days here. All right, so create entity is going to basically say so it'll get the next available entity ID, and then it will mark that entity ID. It'll do whatever needs to be done to make that an entity ID. Actually, all it will really do is probably mark the archetype for the entity ID. We'd probably say we'd say something like archetype by entity ID, composition, or entity. Oh, it would be get next entity ID. Actually, what it'll be is variable entity ID is get next entity ID. And we'll add that here. So we'll mark that, and then we'll return. Well, we'll need to do some additional things. Like we'll need to make room on the archetype for the entity. So we probably need to do something like that, like a get archetype.add entity thing, or like an archetype. Let's say variable archetype is get archetype composition. And we would say something like archetype.add entity ID. And we'd add it here to the record. And then we would return entity ID. So I think we're going to need to separate the adding from the setting. I don't like setting the values on the entity. Appreciate that. You're braver than I working with isometric space in GD. Fairly new programmer. This stuff blows your mind. Yeah, isometric stuff is tough. Isometric is tough. We're actually, the trick that we're doing to get it is that like a deck, which is like one of the things that I was like, you know, a level where like you have a floor. Well, not technically a floor. It's basically the wall and the ceiling. And the wall and the floor. The ceiling comes from the level above. So you have a wall set and a floor set for any given like level, like deck level. And we actually have like, at the moment we have 7 different tile maps to capture that. It's crazy. We have like the left face, the right face, and the top face. So like every single, so like here are like some of the side pieces. And it's because we have all these different outline combinations. So you can kind of see. This is one tile map, but you can kind of see we're separating it out. For the side of the floor, the top of the floor, the side of the wall, and the top of the wall. So we've split it up into such a degree that you need an auto tiler because it's managing all these different layers simultaneously. And all you're setting is like, you're like, this block has a bulk to it. Oh yeah, I got a flash flood warning on my phone a little while ago, and it is flash flooding out there. There's like a river in the street. That's pretty cool. We're inside though. We're nice and inside and warm and safe. I love watching the rain from the inside. What kind of stuff are you working on, Jordan? I feel bad reading out people's full names in the chat. I kind of do it because I'm expecting it to be a display name like in Twitch, but on YouTube it's usually just people's like whole names. So I need to stop doing that. I need to stop just only doing the first name. So the archetype needs an add entity function. It's all good as a fake name. All right, well then I'll. It's got fun alliteration, so it's fun to say. Jordan Jackson. I'm working on learning a Source SDK to make some Half-Life mods for the 20th anniversary. Hell yeah, that's what I first did. When I was learning how to make games, in like 2008. That was the first thing I did, was try to learn some Source SDK stuff, and I was just making levels in Half-Life 2. I never made anything meaningful, but that was the fun thing that I first was like, I want to do this. Hell yeah. I just watched the 20th anniversary Half-Life 2 documentary yesterday. It's so good. I enjoyed it. Nightmare to read through the old documentation. Yeah, true. Yeah, that system is ancient. Hey, Todd Makes Games. How's it going? How are you doing this fine day? Welcome back, by the way. We're creating entities right now. So I want to think about creating entities a little bit before I get back to creating or adding and removing components. I want to think a little bit more about how I'm going to route functionality through the archetypes. Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, it's cool. I should go back and watch the Half-Life documentary. But Half-Life was not as meaningful to me as Half-Life 2 was. Half-Life 2 was like super meaningful to me, so it was really cool to see that documentary. I've been weighing whether I should replay Half-Life 2 soon, or if I should wait for like an RTX mod or something. I can probably just play it. I should probably just play Half-Life 2. So many memories. I think the orange, in my mind, the orange box is like the greatest single retail box product of all time for video games. Like the orange box was incredible. I think I played Half-Life 2 before the orange box. Because the orange box was like, you got the episodes and you got Team Fortress 2 and stuff. That was like the definitive version in my mind. Something about Source Engine is just more fun to play in than the modern engines. Yeah, I get that. All right, so we're getting our next entity ID. And we're doing that by checking the entity live count. Right? So we say create entity, we get the next entity ID, and we do that by either recycling an entity ID or creating an entity ID. So we could say return we could say entity live count is greater than I probably can't post increment oh, this shouldn't be read only. I shouldn't post increment something in a conditional, right? That seems like bad. That seems like bad form. I don't even know if you're allowed to do that. Let's see if we're allowed to do that. We can see it's entity alive count plus plus less than entity IDs count. If it is, we just return entity IDs. Or no, if it's true, if we are able to, we will recycle an entity ID. Otherwise, we'll probably just create an entity ID. That's kind of stupid and over. That's like a kind of silly way to do it, to do this. This is not necessary, but I think it's kind of fun. We shouldn't do the post increment here if we're doing it this way, though. So when we start, the entity live count is 0, and the entity IDs count is 0. So yeah, if all the entities that have been created are alive, we have to create... Oh, I did this in the wrong order. Oh no, I did this in the right order. Yeah. You don't think I can? I think I can. I don't think you should, but I think you can. Here it is, entity live count plus plus. Put it in a ternary operation. As part of the conditional. That's really stupid. But it seems legal. I mean, it might yell at me about it later. It's definitely not something you should do, but... All right. So now we need to implement these two functions. All right, so if we need to create a new entity ID, what we do is we say entity, we'll make the entity ID. We'll say variable entity ID is a new entity ID. It's going to be entity IDs.count. And its version is going to be 0. So its index will be the count, the current count, and its version will be 0. And then what we're going to do... Todd, you're mostly working and lurking. Hope stream is going well. Yeah, no worries. That's the kind of vibe that we're going for here, is just the chill co-working. Compiler warnings are merely suggestions. That's what I believe. I disabled compiler warnings on over here. I should probably re-enable them somewhere. I swore I disabled them somewhere. Or maybe I got rid of them. I had some pragmas that were like, don't tell me about this. I know something. But yeah, that's not a great way to go. Okay, so we get our new entity ID. We add it to the list of entity IDs. We also add it to the entity ID by index. We say entity ID dot index equals here it's the same. When it's created, it's a one-to-one lookup. It's no longer a one-to-one lookup once it starts dying and living and dying and living and being moved around by stuff. Because creating an index is easy because you just create it at the top of the list. The way more complicated thing is going to be the recycling the index. And we'll say return entity ID. And then we also need to increment the entity live count by 1. All right, so that's the case for when we create an entity ID. What if we need to recycle one? So if we need to recycle one, it's a little more complicated. We would get probably whichever one is closest. Well, how did they do it? They just got whichever ones were closest. That's delete. All they did here, they incarnate. Oh yeah, so they just picked the ones that were at the end. They didn't move anything, but they did re-record its index in the sparse IC. So what we do here is first we increment the entity live count plus equals 1. Oh, we probably do that at the end, actually. So, because the entity live count itself is the index into the first dead entity. That's the fun thing about that. That's the fun way of using counts. So we'll increment it at the end. Say variable entity ID is we can say it's entity IDs entity live count. Let's say it's entity live count with version equals version +1. That's probably not the best way to do this, but it's fine with me. So we get the entity out of the entity IDs and we just increment its version. I mean, we could just get it and then I could do version ++. Guess it doesn't really matter. It's a single line of code versus 2 lines, but it doesn't matter. The other alternative is to, yeah, just do this version plus plus. I don't love that as much. Oh, yeah, no, we have to do it this way because it's an immutable struct, as structs should be. That's how we do that. So we get our entity ID, then we replace the entity ID there with this, because you assign and then have to reassign equals entity ID. We say entity ID by index. Okay, so how do we do this part? So entity ID by index. Oh, we say entity ID dot index, and then we say we set that to be entity live count, because that's where it exists in. That's where it exists here at the moment. Is that it? Is this it here? And we just return entity ID. I think that's it. We're recycling an entity ID. So we get it out of the entity IDs list. We get the first dead entity. We increment its version number. We assign it back with this new version number. And then we set this index as the lookup of the entity ID by index dictionary. Plug in the entity ID index and we get back this entity live count. And then we implement the entity live count. And then we return the entity ID. That's it. Okay, so either way, we get this next entity ID by either creation or recycling. Depending. Okay, so we've got our next entity ID. Now we need to do some other things. So we get our next entity ID. We get our archetype, which either gets or creates us an archetype. All right, so that's create, archetype by entity ID equals archetype. All right, so that's it for creating entities. We would then need to set, we'd need to like initialize all the values. All our values would be nada, but that's fine. The systems will do that. The systems are going to be the only ones interested in creating entities anyway. And then the archetype.addEntity, this is a function that we need to implement next. But I think we're actually wrapping it up here for the day. Been live for about 3 hours here, and I need to make lunch. But let's do this, because the whole point of me doing this create entity thing was to get a better idea of, let's call this current entity count. In the same way, let's call this max entities per chunk. Maybe we could say, maybe we call this items, max items per chunk. We don't need current either. We can just call this entity count. Not private anymore either. It's going to be public. It's going to be public. Well, maybe it's not public. Make it public if we need to. So adding an entity just involves creating positions in the chunk for this entity, figuring out where it's so like this where's this array or this lookup? It's here, right? It's here on the entity somewhere. Entity indices, this is it. So we can say entity indices dot add entity ID new chunk indices. I still question just having the entity ID in the chunk indice because we need the entity ID to even find it. So its interchunk is whatever its chunks, whatever its last chunk is. So can we just say, I guess we could just have chunk count. When we create one of these, we don't even have any chunks at all. So these all initialize to 0, so things like the chunk item count is going to be 0. But there won't be any chunks because the chunk list will just have a list of chunks. Won't actually be any there yet. Everything will be 0. Everything starts at 0. Okay, so this is a little more complicated because we basically need to add the entity first and then we can figure out the IDs because we need to check to see if we need to add a new chunk to accommodate the entity. So we'd basically just check the remainder of entity count divided by max items per chunk, right? If the remainder is 0, there's no more space. So we'd say if entity count Count my max items. Yeah. So if there's no room left, then we do something. So if the entity count divided by max items per chunk leaves a remainder of 0, then we need to add chunks. You can just tell the chunk lists to do that. Yeah, we can have this calculation on the archetype level. The chunk lists don't need to check if we need to add a chunk or not, because it would be the same for all the lists. Duplicating this effort on every list in an archetype is stupid. We would just tell. So we just do a for each chunk list and chunk lists dot values. So for each of these, we would do chunk list dot add chunk. Does chunk list has, oh, it's private. Make these public. Let's remove this, or let's move this one. This returns a chunk, which is maybe not necessarily what I want. We can just discard and just say just discard the result of adding the chunk. And then we could use the chunk count as the chunk index. We can use the chunk count, well, only in this case could we do that. So maybe I should just increment chunk count and then do it normally. So we just say chunk count plus equals 1. Maybe I don't need to store chunk count. I should. Because otherwise I need to go into the list and check one of the members of the list. It should actually be chunks per list.
What in the name of heaven is this?
Whoa! The photon blast. Leandro coming in with the 5 gifted subs. Holy shit. Oh my god, you started a golden Kappa train, Leandro. What is going on? Welcome in. Oh, we got one of them. We got one of the gifted subs to Todd Makes Games. Beautiful. Oh, we got one of them to Irish John. So generous. Thank you, Leandro. That's wild. Hopping in here. Wow, what do we even get for a golden Kappa train here? Oh, you get the golden Kappa emote for 24 hours. That's pretty cool. Wow, thank you so much, Leandro. I was gearing up to end, but I feel like I cannot now. I feel like I should keep going. How have you been? What's going on? I am blown away by your generosity. Seriously, thank you. That gets you second place on the all-time sub-gifter list. You've earned it. You're doing great? That is great to hear. I'm doing all right. There's a big rainstorm happening outside, which I'm enjoying watching. I love the sound and the smells of the rain. But I do like watching from, inside, dry, nice and dry inside. But yeah, we're working on adding entities, like the process of creating entities, which are the holders of all of our components. Hear there's a cyclone going on? Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm at the edge. I'm in San Francisco, so I'm at like the southern edge of this storm front. People in Northern California are getting like destroyed. They're getting like, I heard like up to 10 inches of rain or something like that in some places. It's wild. Colleagues from work told you? Yeah, it's the Northern California is getting destroyed, is getting hammered. And while San Francisco counts as Northern California, we're really like in the middle of, of the state geographically. Yeah, maybe I make it so chunkless doesn't return a chunk. What does that change? Oh yeah, we don't use this at all. We just get the last chunk. Either way. Yeah, this is a void. This is gonna become a void. We don't need to return nothing. In which case I can get rid of that. Can actually make it like this. Something came up? No worries. Thank you again, Leandro. Really appreciate it. I can't actually stop the, Oh, did that got us to our sub goal as well? It did. Oh my god. Well, I just realized you also got us to our sub goal for the month. So, thanks, Leandro. What are we doing? We've been working on entities. We've been working on adding entities. So we have a process for creating entities by getting the next entity ID, which will either create a new entity ID or recycle an existing entity ID for a dead entity. And we're working through this because I want to route some more functionality through the archetypes instead of going straight from the world to the chunk list. Oh, there's a hype chest to open from our Golden Kappa hype train. Button mash emote and Golden Kappa for 24 hours. Oh, that's awesome. Look at that. That's great. The button mash is great. That's fun. Yeah, that's a good one. Gotta spam that somewhere. All right, so we're in the middle of this. Adding this entity here. So if we need to, we'll add this chunk. Otherwise, if we don't need to add the chunk, either way, we can now grab the last chunks. So if we need to add an entity ID, we do it. And we basically say, oh, we need to actually return chunk indices. So the only chunk that we actually need to set is the entity ID. Or the only value we need to set is the entity ID. So we need to say. So how are we going to do that? Can we do that with the component typing thing here of the add component? This isn't really add component, is it? This is set component. Add component would be something else. So we can do this. So we can essentially grab this. So item count will start as 0. So we can say component type entity ID dot read write span for we would need to get the right chunk list. We'd need to get chunk lists component type dot flags dot entity ID, and then we would get read write span takes an entity ID. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Read write span just takes an internal index. No, it would just be 0 because it's a new. Oh, it might not be just a new chunk. It'll be. Okay, I get it. We need to say variable chunk list equals this thing. So we need to get this chunk list. Then we can pass in the chunk list dot chunks whatever the top chunk is, whatever the last chunk is. I love that shorthand. I love this little cipher one short. I forgot what this symbol is called. The power symbol. So we got that. We get the chunk, and then we need an. Why does this say entity ID? That can't be right. That is not what read write span takes. Read write span. Oh, it just takes a chunk. Ah, right. So we say read write span, and then we index into the read write span. And this is where we would say chunk list dot chunks this thing dot item count. Maybe we should just do the chunk list dot add component, because it handles all of this for it, right? I don't know why we're trying to do this ourselves. It'll handle the chunk increment for us. It'll handle everything for us. So we actually just do this. We're actually just going to grab this, and we're going to say dot add component entity ID. Bam, handled for us. And then, oh, we do need to return the chunk indices. Or do we? Or do we just set them? Maybe we just set them. In Portuguese, you call it the hat symbol. Oh yeah, I think that's how it's often referred to, because it looks like a hat on top of other letters. Yeah, I think it is often called a hat. What is... It's on this list somewhere. Oh, it's called a carrot. But yeah, I think a lot of people refer to it as a hat. Also called the hat, roof, or house sign. I like hat. Roof I get roof. I'm never going to call this a carrot, ever. We'll call it a hat. I like that better. House is too much? Yeah, house is a stretch. Maybe tent? I don't know. All right, so our chunk lists, we get the right chunk list, we get the entity ID chunk list, and we add the component, entity ID. And this works because we know the type of the thing we're adding. The component ID handles that exact. This is a set component. This is not an add. I need to change this. This is not add component. This literally just sets the component at a location. So we're going to rename this set component. And we'll move it to the correct spot. Oh, we have two set components. I guess that's fine. Oh, this one's a static function, though. This one, I don't understand why I've got. I need to think about this one. This version of it. Oh, this one does a lot. This one's like grabbing the archetype, setting the archetype stuff, grabbing everything through the archetype. I guess that's fine and maybe is something that we do. It could still be static though. I'll change that later. All right, all right. So we did all that. The last thing we need to do is set our entity indices, which I think I want to reformat how this chunk indice thing works. So we're going to say entity indices dot add entity ID new chunk indices. And then this is where we, oh, I see. I see why I wanted to do this a different way, or why I wanted to return some chunk indices back, because only the chunk list knows what we're actually doing here. Yeah, let's have, what was this add component? Let's have this, who else is using this though? You're using this. How are you getting the entity indices back? I don't think you are. I think that's one of the gaps in our process so far. Yeah, we're adding this component and then we need to set the entity indices here. It'd be really awesome to just say archetype.entity indices is this. And then we do it and then just add the thing. We do need to clean up here though. We need to reorganize that whole section, so let's not mess with that. Let's just say, let's start with this. Because this knows what the index is. It could return an int. No, let's have it return the whole thing. Oh, but it needs to know the entity ID associated. Yeah, I know, I hate that. We're getting rid of that. This chunk indices thing. I had it know the entity ID so that we could do an equality check. But I actually don't think that's how I would want the equality thing to work. Like I was gonna have it like as a way of testing whether it refers to the same entity or not. Let's get rid of that for now and just not worry about that, unless that becomes a thing that we feel like we need. Oh, got rid of my dev window here. That's gonna break a bunch of stuff. Oh, maybe not. Do we only use this in 2 places right now? It's weird. 29 and 39. Okay, well this is easy. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna say this is adding an entity. So the entity, yeah. So we're gonna just take this function and put this in here. We're just gonna nest some functions here. Can we not do that? Oh, yeah, we need to change it. So here we're gonna say this returns chunk indices. Return new chunk indices. It's gonna be actually, we could set it earlier. We could declare it earlier and then let's declare it up here. Let's say variable chunk indices equals a new chunk indices. And it's going to be chunks dot count minus 1, and it's going to be no, I guess we know. We actually don't need this returned to us. We actually know this. We actually know this already. We know this on the level of the archetype. We'll do this. Do this first. So this is going to be, this is chunk lists dot count minus 1. Or this is chunk lists dot chunks per list. So it's chunks per list minus 1. And then here it's a new chunk indices. Chunks per list, and then we need the interior index, which is entity count. Then we need to increment entity count. Oh no, we can do it here. We can. This is where we can do our stupid post increment. Entity count plus plus. Voice. Yeah. Why is this upset with me? Oh, too many parentheses. Leandro with the hydrate. Thanks, Leandro. Oh, I actually have to go now. I'll give you the hydrate, and then I'm going to need to sign off. I was going to leave like 30 minutes ago, and then you came screaming in with the gifted subs, and I felt like I had to give you something, some value here. But we're going to be back tomorrow. We're doing our very first Saturday stream. So that should be cool. But yeah, I got to get back to work. I got to get back to the day job now. But really appreciate everyone tuning in here. Thanks again, Leandro, for the incredible support, for all the gifted subs to the community. Thanks everyone for watching. Yeah, I hope y'all have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you next time. Bye.